Well, while they're working on that, I'm going to go ahead and read Kathy's introduction. We're very lucky to have our speaker tonight as Kathy Kiely. She is at the MU School of Journalism. She's a veteran reporter and editor with a multimedia portfolio and a passion for transparency, free speech, and teaching. After a long career covering politics in Washington, she moved into the classroom full-time to help make fact-based journalism viable again. We can all say amen to that. Kathy previously taught at the University of New Hampshire, American University, George Washington University, and Princeton University. And she is worked for she was the inaugural Press Freedom Fellow for the National Press Club's Nonprofit Journalism Institute. She's organized events around free speech issues and advocated for journalists who have been jailed or threatened for their work. So this is an extremely relevant experience at this point in our nation's life. Her reporting and editing career includes stints as a web producer for WAMU-FM, as an editor for Bill Moyers and for Bloomberg Politics. At the Sunlight Foundation, she worked with reporters, designers, developers, and policy advocates to press for more access to government data and create web-based tools that made it more user-friendly. She's covered Congress and national politics for USA Today. She's headed Washington bureaus for a couple of different newspapers. She was a White House correspondent. Yeah, I mean, you name it. In the field of journalism, Kathy has done it. And it looks like we are we ready?
Yes, I think so. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So I'll use my classroom voice just in case. Okay, so first of all, I need to say that I'm sorry to be probably the most depressing after dinner speaker I've ever had. I feel like I should have brought the martini car with me because I'm kind of going to be a Debbie Downer, I hate to say it. But first of all, this was a topic I was asked to discuss. It is the topic that is filling up most of my days. I am the Lee Hills Chair in Free Press Studies, and so it's a big preoccupation for me right now. But I'll start out by saying that this slide, I could have used it for every president I've ever covered, and not to date myself, but that goes all the way back to Reagan, because no president really loves the press. And every president that I have ever covered has always wanted to control the message and the image. So, this is, that tension has always been there. But every president, at least those I've covered, has respected the role that the press plays in our democracy. One that is so vital that it is established in our Constitution. And let me see if I can make this work. Let's try this one. So I saw somebody has a T-shirt on with this, the First Amendment. And you see I've highlighted the key parts. But one of the things that scholars always like to point out is that the First Amendment is written in the negative. It doesn't say what the press can do. It says what Congress cannot do. And I would say probably my guess is that people at the White House are parsing this right now and saying, Congress doesn't say anything about the president. But the president doesn't make laws. He only executes them.
Would you read it for the Zoom audience?
Yes, for the Zoom audience, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So that is your First Amendment, and for the founders, freedom of the press was closely related to freedom of speech. You can see that in the First Amendment. They're linked together, and really, what this is about, it is not the rights of a bunch of reporters, which is what the White House is trying to portray it as, that is at stake here. It is your right to have access to information that we gather and produce, and by extension, your right to speak about it and think about it and respond to it freely and without fear. And so for the audience at home, I have a quote up here by Thomas Jefferson. This comes from Monticello, which is the definitive Thomas Jefferson site. All those fake Jefferson quotes get cleansed out. But what Thomas Jefferson did say in 1787 was this: the basis of our governments being the opinion of the people, the very first object should be to keep that right. And were it left for me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate for a moment to prefer the latter. So there's Tom, who has flaws, but we like what he said there. So I should say that Donald Trump's relationship with the press is different. And this slide, but it goes back a ways. This is not new. And if you notice this slide and this headline, Trump's troubling relationship with the press, this is dated in February 21st, 2017. It was a piece written, I think, for the Brookings Institution by Marvin Kalb, a very distinguished journalist. And so this was 1 month into the first Trump administration, and we could already see where things were going. But having said that, Donald Trump has not always disliked the press. And in fact, when he was a real estate developer who badly wanted to be a celebrity, Donald Trump had a very symbiotic relationship with New York City's tabloids, which reveled in cataloging his over-the-top love life. And I found this treasure trove on the website of my former employer, the New York Daily News. And here are some of the chapters of the Trump's ups and downs of his love life as cataloged on the wood, as we like to call that's tabloidese for the front page of the Daily News and the New York Post. And in fact, New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman, who probably a lot of you have seen on TV, AKA the Trump Whisperer, Maggie got her start at the New York Daily News and the New York Post. And that's where she began her relationship with Donald Trump and his retinue. And that's why she is so well sourced with the Trumps. So, I mean, that's part of the Trump history with the press. And back then, back in the 80s and 90s, and really the 90s, Trump seemed to be living by that great saying that people have attributed to P.T. Barnum, which is no publicity is bad publicity. He just really enjoyed being public. And so here are two more. These are not about his love life. These are about Donald Trump's proto-political ambitions. And I want you to notice, I put a little arrow there. You probably can't see it, but the date on that first headline, I want to be the prez, is Friday, October 8th, 1999. And there he is proposing a ticket of himself and Oprah Winfrey. Can you imagine that today? And then here's another thing that's kind of unimaginable today, given the president's economic plans. Trump's way out plan to end the national debt. So rich. Maybe he and Bernie should get together. So this all happened. This is back. This happened right after Jesse Ventura, the World Wrestling Federation, Jesse Ventura shockingly shocked the world by winning the governor's race in Minnesota. And he was running on this new party called the Reform Party. So after Jesse had this success, and we now see like Trump has had this long fascination with wrestling. And so Jesse won, and so then right after that, Trump started teasing this idea that he would run as the Reform Party's presidential nominee. But he eventually, I think, thought it would be, he had other things to do, other bankruptcies to engage in. And so now he's, you know, Trump earlier, I showed you these headlines, he kind of didn't mind any publicity, even if it kind of roughed him up a bit. But as he's gotten older, I know he doesn't want to acknowledge that, older, he's gotten a little more thin-skinned about his press coverage. So after the election last year, before he was sworn in as president, he sued the Des Moines Register in neighboring Iowa. Why? Because before the election, the Des Moines Register published a poll that showed Trump might not win Iowa. Now, it turned out the poll was wrong. Trump did win Iowa, and he went on to win the election. And so, has the world ever seen such a sore winner? But he's suing. And this gets, there's a serious implication to this, which I'll talk about in a minute. So then he was sworn in as president, and almost immediately began to upend things in Washington in ways that I would argue really threaten an independent media. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. And I'm going to focus on 4 fights that he is conducting right now. This is not the entire universe of Trump fights with the press, but these are 4 biggies, and I want to examine them a little bit and talk to you a little bit about why they're important and what's going on, at least in my opinion. So let's take the first one, Trump versus the AP. The AP stands for Associated Press, which is a big wire service, the biggest wire service. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what that means. So in February, the White House suddenly banned the Associated Press from its traditional role as a regular in the White House pool. Now, what is the White House pool? It's not an actual pool, though, bit of trivia, there is an actual pool, one dating back to FDR's presidency, right underneath those very rows of seats that you're seeing. Back when I was a reporter there, it was a little scruffier, and you could actually pick up the floor tiles and look down at the empty pool. And, you know, obviously we know FDR had polio, and swimming was his exercise. And if you look carefully at that press room, it is the perfect shape and size for you to get in a few laps. So that was, in fact, the White House pool. But what is the White House pool we're talking about? And this is from the website of WACA, as we say, the White House Correspondents Association. And the White House press pool is, it refers to a small group of reporters, so we call it the pool reporters, who cover the president in tight situations, say the Oval Office, or maybe he's making a visit to injured troops at Walter Reed Hospital. You couldn't bring 60 or 70 reporters into those kind of situations. So there is a pool, and they go in and take notes and gather audio and video for everybody else. And traditionally, for many, many, many years, as long as the White House pool has existed, the Associated Press has always had a place in the pool. They always have a reporter in the pool. And why is this? It's because of the AP's reach. The AP is a global news cooperative. That means its members, whether they're the Columbia Missourian or the Columbia Tribune or KOMU or KMIZ, they contribute material to the Daily News Report, and they can take material from the Daily News Report. And so by AP's own estimate, its stories its audio broadcasts, its video broadcasts, and its photographs are seen by 4 billion, that's B as in boy, billion people a day. So they, you can see why they get pride of place, because they serve all the other news agencies. So I've got to hand it to the PR wizards at the White House. They are brilliantly casting this battle as a fight that they are having against a bunch of whiny big dog journalists who are worried about what seat they get to sit in the press room. And having sat in those seats myself, I'll concede there's a little vulnerability there. Sometimes reporters are whiny and self-important. But that is not what this fight is really about. What this fight is about is, number one, Trump's desire to determine what the press writes. And number two, Trump's desire to determine who gets to cover him. Remember, the White House includes a private residence, but it is not a private residence. It is public housing that you pay for. Okay, and so I think the temporary occupants don't get to decide which reporters get to go in. That's my view. But anyway, the White House has been quite open about why the AP has been put in the penalty box, as the wire services lawyer put it. It's not because AP is an elite journalistic organization. It is because AP has not changed its style book to refer to the Gulf of Mexico by the name that Trump prefers. And this is exactly why. Now, what's interesting about this is there are other big name organizations in the White House pool rotation, such as the New York Times, that have not adapted Gulf of America. Nonetheless, the White House is not banning them. It targeted the Associated Press, which, far from being an elite organization, is widely regarded, as I explained to you, this is a co-op, and it's widely regarded in my profession as kind of like the Jeep of journalism, you know, no nonsense, just the facts kind of stories that get picked up by news organizations. I mean, go pick up the Missourian or the Tribune or the St. Louis Post-Dispatch or the Kansas City Star and just look at how many stories say AP, AP, AP. And that, I think, is what made it a favored target for Trump. Because capture the AP style book, which we all use, and you capture them all. Okay? So Trump has picked his fight strategically. Now, I want to talk about the other part of this. He wants the AP to describe things the way he thinks the world should be described. And remember, the AP has clients in Mexico, a lot of them. So that's the side that I get to decide how I'm covered. The other part of this fight is I get to decide who gets to cover me. Okay, this is a page right out of celebrity journalism. You know, I'm Tom Cruise. I want to pick the Vanity Fair reporter that's going to interview me, and I'm also going to give you a list of questions that you're not allowed to ask me. That's typical for celebrity journalism. The president is not a celebrity. The president is a public servant. So, but this president is a little confused about that. So, I want you to understand why this is important. And why this is important is who gets to cover the president has never been determined by the president. In large part has been decided by reporters. And how did that happen? And it may surprise you to learn this, because this is an institution that is much maligned as the press. But back in the 19th century, the US Congress did an unusually far-sighted and enlightened thing. This was right after the Civil War, and the press was starting to professionalize. It was right at the turn of the century when the Missouri School of Journalism was founded, when the National Press Club was founded. Press used to be an arm of they were political hacks working for political parties. But after the war, as advertising started to become a really important source of revenue, the press could be more independent. And more reporters started to come to Washington because of this little invention called the telegraph, which made it possible for dispatches for average Americans sitting at home to learn about war and diplomacy and politics, all the things that were being decided by the people you voted for. And so more reporters started to come to Washington because they could get this news out fast to the public. And Congress was trying to figure out where are we going to put all these people? We love the publicity. Where are we going to sit them? And so they were allocating space for reporters, and they had to figure out who was going to run that. And Congress decided it shouldn't be Congress because it would look like they were spying on the press. So they created a very odd little institution called the Standing Committee of Correspondence. And the Standing Committee of Correspondence, which there are several of them now, one for TV, one for radio, it's kind of, but anyway, it's about 5 people, and they are elected by their reporters, and they are elected by accredited reporters, people who have credentials for the Capitol. And they run this is the Senate Press Gallery. There's also a House Press Gallery. They run this space. They hire the people, the staff people who work there, and they fire the staff people who work there. And they are elected for 2-year terms, and they also, most importantly, get to decide who gets a credential for Capitol Hill. So you have to apply. There are certain qualifications that you have to show, and they review. And what are they looking for? They're looking for, are you really a reporter? I've been on the committee, so I know. And are you working for a legitimate news organization? Or are you saying, oh, I'm with the American Widget Manufacturers newsletter. So you're really a lobbyist, right, for the American widget manufacturer. So that's what they're looking for. But reporters decide who gets credentialed on Capitol Hill. That is important because if you have a Capitol Hill credential, you can apply for a White House credential. You can't if you haven't, or it used to be, you couldn't if you didn't have pass this first bar or review by your peers. And more recently, the White House has been allowing people who didn't necessarily have that credential into the White House. And under the Trump administration, in the White House, there was also the White House Correspondents Association, and they ran coverage of the White House, another elected group of reporters. They ran the coverage of the White House, including setting up the daily rotation of who was in the White House pool. But under the current White House, the decision about who gets FaceTime with the president is being made by the president's press secretary. So the Associated Press has sued. And I think we're going to have to leave the battle right now in the courts where it continues to play out. I will only say the latest development in it, the court did order the White House, and it was a Trump-appointed judge, interestingly, who ordered the White House to reinstate the AP. The White House is not doing that. And now the White House has now said their new since they don't want to let the AP into the pool, they're just going to say no wire service in the pool. And what that does is all of you who are reading those papers that have AP stories, you're the ones losing access. But if the president wants only journalists who are sympathetic to him, that's a pretty good way to handle it. So that's the fight against the AP, which I spent the most time on because it requires a lot more background. There's a lot of history there that the White House is upending. So now I'm going to move to the fight against VOA, which I'm really using as shorthand. VOA stands for Voice of America, and it's really shorthand for a larger constellation of news organizations like Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, Radio Marti, Middle East Broadcasting Network. All of them operated with your tax dollars by something called the U.S. Agency for Global Media. And the Trump administration's intentions for that were flagged initially by Elon Musk. And Elon Musk, on his social media platform X, posted this, I can't remember what day, and just shut them down. Europe is free now. Tell that to people in Belarus. Europe is free now. I'm not sure about Hungary. And nobody listens to them anymore. Well, that's not true. And they're radical left crazy people. And so he signaled what was going to happen with these organizations. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to play this, but I'll try. What is the voice? How did this all start? And what is this? And why should you care? Is it worth the roughly $900 million of your tax money that it takes a year to fund these organizations, these broadcasts? Most Americans never hear these broadcasts because, in fact, the organizations that are funded by your tax dollars are actually legally prohibited from broadcasting here because privately funded media doesn't want to compete with government funded media. And these are outlets that are fully underwritten by the US government. But why do we do this? Well, Voice of America was the first one of these entities ever created. It was created in World War II to broadcast in German to Germany. And I'll see if I can, it's not going to play, but I can, there's a way you can listen to this. I'll let you listen to it. Actually, let me see if I can jump off. Well, I'll just tell you what it says. It's in German. You can listen to it online, but it's also translated. And what the broadcast said, the first broadcast in 1942 is, this is a voice from America, an America at war. And it says, every night at this hour, we will bring you the news. Some days the news will be good. Some days the news will be bad. But we will always tell you the truth. That has been the motto for Voice of America for more than 80 years. And I will tell you, because I've traveled overseas where people, contrary to what Elon Musk said, do listen to these broadcasters. And the reason that they listen is because we do tell them the truth. We have told them the truth. The Voice of America and its sister entities have been First Amendment news organizations that have, because they report about America, but they don't do it with rose-colored glasses. They give it to you warts and all. And that has immensely enhanced our credibility worldwide because we tell the truth about ourselves. We tell the truth about the Black Lives Matter protests. We tell the truth about the civil rights movement. We tell the truth about our failings. And that has made us believable. And so it's an incredibly powerful tool. I would argue that things like Stars and Stripes, which is another federally funded publication for our troops, and Voice of America, these are the most powerful weapons America has in its arsenal. More powerful than a B-52, because these are our values in action, and we show that we mean what we say. We did. Now, during Trump's first term, he attempted to breach the editorial wall at VOA, and basically, and the rest of the USAGM, U.S. Agency for Global Media Networks. But he was stymied actually by Congress. And a lot of very conservative Republican members of Congress were part of this. So he couldn't accomplish this. And so I think that's one reason that now he is trying to take another angle at this, which is to just shutter the agencies. Now, part of the problem with this is one of my favorite writers. So I wrote this for USA Today recently. I used to work for USA Today, and so I can still get things in the paper. And part of the problem is that this not only eliminates an important tool in our soft power toolbox, leaving the field open to Russia and China to dominate with their own media, which I know they have. But it also, the other problem here, and this is the really criminal thing, it puts journalists whom we recruited to work here in mortal danger. These are people who we brought to the United States so they could broadcast in their native languages to people back home who don't get uncensored news. And by my count, and I am keeping a database, there are at least 24. There are many, many people who will lose their jobs, but there are at least 24 who are at imminent risk of being sent back to countries where they will be imprisoned or worse for having worked for Uncle Sam. There's one Egyptian journalist whose husband has already been sentenced in absentia. And they have 30 days to find a way to not go back to Egypt, thanks to this shuttering of this organization. Some days it's hard to be American. People that are getting fired include people like this guy, who is a really well-known journalist in Ukraine, where another one of those European countries that's free, according to Elon Musk. And people in Ukraine are just devastated that they are not hearing this guy's reports anymore. So that case, these cases are also in the courts, where we are going to have to leave it for now. There was one victory won, but Voice of America, there's a hearing tomorrow, and we are hoping that that hearing will add, the judge will also put a stay on the removal of people who are working for the Middle East Broadcasting Network. But that is still very much in play. And as you can see, the Trump administration doesn't necessarily react the way the judges would like them to when they issue orders. So we'll have to see what happens there. So I won't take as much time on this. I think you probably know that the other battle, this one is going to be before Congress. This week we learned that the White House intends to ask Congress to rescind funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is the umbrella agency for NPR and PBS. That will affect us right here in Columbia, because losing CPB funding would punch a significant hole in the budgets of local NPR stations, including our own KBIA. And that means that it'll be harder for us to educate students who get, through their work with KBIA, get to help produce award-winning projects like Canned Peaches, which was a Murrow Award winner last year. And full disclosure alert, my chair helped fund this project. And that it was a project that featured stories about the people who grow and produce food here in Missouri. How's that for radical leftists for you? So that's another battle that is going to be fought, and that one is going to be fought in Congress very soon, coming up. And last but not least, in this case, President Trump is using the power of his own executive branch and his own bully pulpit against another target. Donald Trump already, right around the same time he sued the Des Moines Register, he also sued CBS. Again, in another episode of sore winner, he was mad because right before the election, CBS.
May I have your attention, please?
Oops.
The library will be closing in 30 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna get out of here in time. Okay, so what they did was they decided he sued CBS. Why did he sue CBS? Well, because CBS aired a program
Thank you.
on which it interviewed Kamala Harris, who was running for president at the time. They also invited her opponent, Donald Trump, to be on the air, and he declined. But he was but they ran Harris, and that made him angry. He thought that was unfair. So he sued CBS, and they made headlines again this past couple of days because CBS on Sunday, 60 Minutes, had a couple of segments that were critical of or raised questions about Trump's policies, including his policies in Ukraine. And that incensed the Donald, and he went on Truth Social, which is his social media platform, and went on this rant that actually was too long for me to fit into the screen, but the money quote is right here. Hopefully, the Federal Communications Commission, as headed by its highly respected chairman, Brendan Carr, will impose maximum fines and punishment, which is substantial, for their unlawful and illegal behavior. I mean, forget the grammatical syntax salad there. CBS is out of control at levels never seen before, and they should pay a big price for this. I probably don't need to tell you, the Federal Communications Commission, which is part of the executive branch, controls licenses for television stations. It cannot de-license, unfortunately for the Donald, it cannot de-license a network, but the networks own a number of very profitable TV stations, which are licensed by the FCC. So that represents a real threat, and that highly respected chairman, Trump was flattering in his all caps title in his tweet, was appointed by none other than Donald Trump. The other problem with this is, and this is a real issue for organizations that are smaller, like the Des Moines Register, is that even if a lawsuit is frivolous, and even if a lawsuit ultimately is decided in your favor, you, the media organization, have to spend boatloads of bucks defending yourself. That is money that you could be using to pay reporters to do stories about the American people and the problems and challenges and opportunities that the American people have, and that is a loss for the reading and viewing and listening public. Where does all this leave us? Well, in a whole lot of trouble, I think, because we have a president whose actions increasingly mirror those of indubitable authoritarians like Rodrigo Duterte of the Philippines, Viktor Orban of Hungary, and Donald Trump's new best friend, the self-described coolest dictator in the world, Nayib Bukele of El Salvador. So what do we do? I wish I had a really pat answer to send you home with, but what I am going to do is keep encouraging the folks who commit journalism and who will commit journalism in the future, because I'm with Thomas Jefferson. Better to have no government at all than one without a free and independent press. Keep its power in check. So thank you for listening. If you don't see me tomorrow, you know that I've been renditioned. do we have time to take questions? Any questions? Before the library closes? We're gonna shut this place down. Yes, and back.
So, how close are we to whatever press exists in the Soviet, well, it's not the Soviet Union, in Russia today? How close are we to that?
Would you
So the
repeat the
question
question?
is, how close are we to an authoritarian regime? I think, well, I think we're very close. I think, the one thing that's stopping it is the courts right now. The question is how much, the court doesn't have an army or anything to enforce it, so it's always been by rule of law. The other way, if you have a runaway executive, has traditionally been through impeachment. But I don't, Donald Trump just won. He just won election. 77 million people voted for him. So even if there were more signs of vertebrate life in Congress than there are right now, and that's been the biggest shock to me, frankly, as somebody who covered Congress for a long time. But I think it would be very hard to do. So right now, the courts, and then I think the other thing that distinguishes us from a Soviet Russia or a more classic, what we think of as an authoritarian regime, is I'm still standing here talking to you, saying this stuff. And as long as Americans feel like they can speak out, I think we're not quite there yet. But a lot of people are afraid to speak out. And I think that is scary. Yes.
Did the Supreme Court sort of create this monster with its decision that if anything a president does while they are acting as president, they cannot be liable for criminal conduct? So doesn't that sort of give him permission to ignore the court?
Well, so the question is, referring to the Supreme Court ruling about presidential privilege, and does this really empower an executive to sort of say, okay, I'm never going to be held criminally liable for anything I do as president, so I can keep going. That may have some, it may give some encouragement or, but I think the biggest deterrent for politicians is voters. Are the voters going to still love me? And then also, could I get impeached? And so I think that's more important than anything, because the whole idea of whether you're liable for criminal charges, that's really post-presidency. You can't, our Justice Department, and really most democracies have kind of a prohibition against lawsuits or criminal cases against a sitting executive just because they view that as, so the answer for a criminal or, a runaway executive is not a criminal case. It has always been impeachment or being thrown out by the voters. Yes, sir.
The CBS and ABC, I think, both made payment to President Trump. Where did that money go? Was that to him personally? Where else?
I don't know exactly the mechanics of how the settlements worked. And I do know ABC. I'm not sure about CBS, if they actually have paid anything. But what this is all about is Donald Trump, probably where the payments are going are to pay his lawyers, frankly. But what this is all about, the reason, and I don't think it was right. I wish they hadn't done it. But the reason they're doing it is to avoid a long and costly lawsuit. And we've seen this before, where some news organizations, even if they think they're going to win, they'll say, you know what, it's cheaper to just settle this thing and make it go away. Because, and that is not unusual in law cases. I think it's dangerous here because what's at stake is freedom of the press, and I think this is a fight we just have to take on and see it through to the end, win or lose. You've got to go down fighting. But And the good thing is, I think we're starting to see more people pushing back now. But yes, that was unfortunate.